papers on Wednesday, so I think a lot of them are like, "Oh, cool, you're doing your conference now," which I would if I could, but next week we literally are gone. Perdomo and I leave Monday. Conference is Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then I think we have to drive home Friday, so that's why I'll try to pop in, but just really covered those two classes or two papers for you guys. Let me see if I had them in here too. Oh yeah, this was a guy that we had in counseling that like literally teaches on every subject I've found imaginable. He wrote like the book on group counseling, and he also has written all kinds of books. Dr. Kaplan. But I think during the pandemic, he just started like teaching his books on YouTube and monetized his channel. So, Introduction to Narcissistic Personality Disorder. That actually looks hilarious. The dude's kissing himself in the mirror. Did they have you guys do any like presentations on a major mental health disorder in psychology or anything? Or like, we do that for my human behavior in the social environment classes. Some people pick narcissism, some pick alcoholism, some pick addictions.
I think in none of my classes so far I've done big presentations. It's just all papers.
Right. Psychology is often papers, isn't it? And more tests than social work have. We usually don't have many tests. We could, but I was taught it with papers, so I've just never popped in a quiz or a multiple choice test. We do licensure prep because our seniors can take licensure exam the final semester that they're here at school. So you can graduate, have your license in social work, have a bachelor's, and a lot of them apply to that advanced standing program that starts on May 15th, right after you graduate. And you're done in 11 months. You got a master's degree 11 months after you graduate. It's fast. So, he does everything. Reefer madness, cannabis use disorder, hidden struggle gambling disorder, stimulant use disorder. He's got some cocaine and dollar bills there. It's kind of funny. Did you take drugs and behavior with Perdomo? That's like Perdomo's favorite class, I think.
I'll take the class. Don't know if it was Perdomo or it was another teacher.
He loves that class, I think. Let's see. So we did, and you can catch it too, whatever you've missed, I've got on YouTube for you guys. If you wanted to go back in the class. But the first few chapters we were kind of going over. Did you guys do anything with redlining yet? Have you ever learned about what redlining is on property sales? I almost feel like, I guess you could go back and watch it, and that's just in case if they're watching here, but it's a practice. Let me see if I can find a quicker video that's kind of messed up. Social work gets more into the empowerment issues. Redlining videos. We found a few that were actually pretty good, but I'll see if there's like a quicker. Here's a shorter one. This is 1:30. Just so you know the practice and how they're trying to fight.
What is redlining? Redlining is a discriminatory lending practice denying access to federally backed mortgages and loans to certain communities based on race and ethnicity. It all started in the 1930s. During the housing crisis of the Great Depression, real estate moguls such as Springfield's Harry Kissel laid the groundwork for the National Housing Act of 1934. From this, a new federal agency was formed, the Homeowners Loan Corporation, and with it, residential security maps that became the standard to determine the best places.
That's actually Dayton. I wonder if we're going to see Wilberforce out here. It might not be far enough, but there's a lot of redlining in Cincinnati, probably Chicago. Did you say you're from Chicago?
Mm-hmm.
Definitely Detroit.
For housing investments. White communities with strong racially restricted deeds were given a grade A rating and identified as desirable for lending purposes, while Black communities, regardless of their economic status, were given a grade D rating and branded as hazardous and high risk. No federally backed loans would be made there. Redlining locked out millions of Americans from accessing mortgages and stunted opportunities for Black families to build wealth to pass down to future generations. Although the practice of redlining was outlawed with the signing of the 1968 Fair Housing Act, the damage was done. Segregation was embedded in our cities and suburbs. Living in segregated communities has modern-day consequences, including sharp disparities in family wealth, education, and life expectancy. These maps were made more than 80 years ago, and yet they still tell a story that impacts us today, the story of redlining.
So that's just like a brief. We had a few videos the other day. We covered, I guess we haven't shown that, but that looks more like a cartoon. We didn't show that as much. We definitely showed this one. This one was really good. And you know, why social work began in Chicago. So that was the other thing on Friday we covered, just that Chicago housing issues and really child labor laws are what started social work. It was 110 years ago. There was a few women that got in, and different than psychology, social work gets into like legislation, and they'll go to Washington, D.C. and try to push policies to change stuff. So you could get into that type of social work if you wanted to. You can also do, that's like macro social work, whereas micro is just one-on-one. So you'll like meet with somebody or do an individual counseling session, or when you get your independent license, open your own private practice and be a therapist. So that's one major difference. When I was studying psychology, we got everything what to do, and then they kind of said, go on and get your doctorate now, you know. But like in social work, you actually can stop with BSW and get a license in social work and practice. If you do the extra year for an MSW, you will probably double your income. But I'll show this one since I didn't show it yesterday. Excuse me,
Many
or
people
Wednesday.
lost their homes during the Great Depression. Plus, housing construction came to a halt. So under President Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal, the government created the Home Owners Loan Corporation, or HOLC, in 1933, and the Federal Housing Administration, or FHA, in 1934. The FHA insured mortgages that resulted in the mass production of houses for suburban subdivisions built strictly for white people around the country.
How are you?
The wording in the HOLC contracts actually forbade properties from being sold to anyone who wasn't white. The FHA also created a new mortgage system, which made housing in the suburbs affordable, the same mortgage system that is used to this day. But Black people were not granted access to these new affordable loans. As a matter of fact, in 239 US cities, the HOLC created color-coded residential security maps to decide where mortgages could or cannot be issued. The maps categorized neighborhoods by 4 grades: green, blue, yellow, and red. Green was for neighborhoods where professional men lived. These neighborhoods lacked, quote, a single foreigner or Negro. These were the easiest neighborhoods to get an FHA loan. Neighborhoods in red zones were considered hazardous because of infiltration by, quote, an undesirable population. These were predominantly Black neighborhoods and were completely ineligible for FHA loans. Today, this practice is known as redlining. With virtually no other home ownership options, African Americans in cities were forced into neighborhoods that received little to no access to credit, mortgages, investment from banks, insurance companies, and savings and loans associations. Local banks consider these neighborhoods unfit for investment. Man, entire blocks were empty and crumbling. Access to healthcare, retail stores, and grocery stores with healthy foods was scarce. With limited businesses in the area, employment was rarely available, and crime in these neighborhoods often followed. If an African American in one of these redline zones wanted to buy instead of rent, Remember, they wouldn't have access to the FHA loans their white counterparts did. So in some places, like one neighborhood of Chicago's West Side, Black people had to buy on contract. This was a predatory agreement where the buyer would often purchase the home at about twice the price that the seller had paid. The seller kept the deed until the house was fully purchased, in contrast to a normal mortgage where buyers can gain equity in the meantime. If the buyer missed just one payment, they would lose their down payment, all their previous monthly payments, and even the home itself. The seller would get full rights to the home back and repeat the same predatory practice with another Black buyer. On the other hand, white families were able to send their children to college using the equity they built. They were able to take care of their elderly parents and didn't need to depend on their own kids financially once they got old themselves. Most notably, they were able to build generational wealth for their families. None of these benefits accrued to African Americans. For decades, redlining was responsible for a widening disparity between a prosperous suburban America and impoverished inner cities. Finally, in 1968, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Fair Housing Act, which made it illegal to discriminate in the sale or rental of housing in any neighborhood. It also made neighborhoods where FHA loans were accepted accessible to Black people for the first time. But by then it was too late for many Black families to afford the houses that had risen significantly in price over decades. Also, redlining policies were difficult to eliminate and have continued even in recent years. In 2010, the U.S. Justice Department discovered Wells Fargo Bank had used similar policies to charge higher fees and rates to Black and Latinx people. It also placed them in predatory subprime loans. A New York Times article exposed loan officers who called Black clients, quote, mud people, and the risky subprime loans they pushed on them, quote, ghetto loans. In 2017, the home ownership rate of Black families in the US was 44%, compared to 73.7% for white families. According to the Brookings Institution, wealth is defined as total assets minus total liabilities. In 2017, Black wealth in this country amounted to about 5% of white wealth, even though their income was about 60% of what whites made. The disparity in wealth is because, according to Forbes, equity from homes is the most consistent way to build wealth in this country. But without the same advantages, Black people were boxed out of the best opportunity to gain generational wealth for almost half a century. African Americans have always had good reason to be skeptical of the American dream. Because for most, that's all it was, a dream.
So I know we watched a few of these on Wednesday, I want to say Tuesday, and kind of like the solution that has been put forward to this and kind of where and why social workers got involved in policy and like different things to like push equitable legislation to look at disparities in health, disparities in mental health, and ways we can bring about solutions to it. You know, you find the problem, you locate, identify it, and create solutions. So looking for what those solutions would look like and why social workers do become involved in the Congress and the Senate and places of that sort. They call it an empowering profession. I know we were cruising through the first few chapters, and I was going to go over the papers one more time if you guys had questions, but just kind of get you into the swing of things on understanding also our code of ethics that came about, that unconditional positive regard for your client, which can sometimes be hard to do. You know, it talks about in the paper, what are some of these things that we hold in our ethics that could be hard and challenging to do. Sometimes unconditional positive regard is hard as you're like, really, I'm going to see you guys here again, and I've given you solutions and homework to do, and then you don't do it. So like sometimes it's easy to jump to judgmental and want to be like, why aren't you like fixing this? And it's important then to understand the several dynamics that are going on with challenges that come up, and why we use the ecological perspective. So like in terms of theories, the most often used theory in social work is the ecological perspective, because we looked at the holistic person, everything that creates a person. What neighborhood did you grow up in? What is your spirituality background? What was your diet growing up? Were you exposed to any carcinogens in your water or lead paint in your house or things of that nature? And then getting in and focusing forward towards the solutions. And so social work in general it is a little bit older than the counseling profession, but not as old as psychology in general. Psychology has been around a long time, but it incorporates a lot of counseling and psychology and advocacy work. So a lot of these agencies we see are in different areas that, since the Affordable Care Act, access to social workers has like gone viral. Like people have access no matter what your income is. Like if you don't have enough money and you're able to get Medicare and Medicaid, that will pay for counseling and mental health services. Whereas before 2011, if you didn't have insurance, you probably weren't going to see a like counselor, therapist, social worker, or psychologist. So that's been interesting too. And again, that kind of pushed through with the Affordable Care Act in 2012, and why you see so many job openings for social workers in general, because there's a lot of folks to be served. And before 2012, it was hard to like find ways to pay for it. So some of the social service settings, you've got both public and private. The public ones are established by law, affiliated with the government, so like federal, state, and local. Mostly the source of income is taxes, similar to the schools. Public and private, in terms of private ones, you've got NGOs, which are non-governmental organizations. You've got community national and then international special interest groups. And that's what you'll be comparing on that second paper, is like, what does the International Federation of Social Work look like, and who do they serve, and what are some jobs you see that you could get as a social worker doing it, and how much do they pay? I always love finding how much they pay.
Oh, you mean the third one?
Right here.
Third paper?
Right.
Oh, okay.
And I guess the second, since you've already done the first, so I'm thinking
Oh, yeah.
one is due next week and one is due the day that I would get home. Is that the 12th? So Perdoma and I leave Monday, conference Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, then we drive back Friday.
How far are you guys
It's Virginia,
going?
And-
Oh, is that far?
deep. We're stopping halfway. I am, at least. He might be flying because his wife is pregnant.
Oh, yeah.
Sarah. Did you guys get to meet her?
Mhm.
One time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's probably easier to fly than to drive 10 hours. I don't know.
But they both go to the conference?
They are. They are both going. She's the secretary though too, isn't
Oh,
it?
cool.
So yeah. So that's why I wanted to set you up for your papers. You're right. It's the third one, but it's the second one due while I'm gone, essentially. So I'm like, you had a 2-pager last week, or I guess that was Monday, a 3-pager, then a 4. We only have 3 weeks left. That's insane. That just, I don't know if I've taught classes this quickly before, but it's summer, you know, we can get through it. It's just basically a paper every week, paper or presentation every week is what it looks like. And a couple chapters every week to actually get through them all. Actually 3, because it's 14 chapters over 4.5 weeks. So, that's what I was saying before too. So before social workers came about, who do you think delivered most of the social work services in the United States? And like, yeah, Yeah, like religious folks, because it was kind of their built-in code of ethics, maybe, or like it was mostly churches. That's why all the hospitals you see. How many do you have in your city that are like St. Elizabeth, St. Luke, St. John, St. whatever? And they're all saints because they came from a religious organization, and that's why. So you got for-profit and not-for-profit. Neither one is terrible. If you are considered nonprofit and you're a social worker, your student loans are forgiven in 10 years, which is kind of nice. I've done 7, so I have 3 left. If you teach at a public school or if you work in a public agency, there is an actual route to forgiveness. Nonprofit is service rather than a profit motive. For profit, they say profit is more over the motive, or maybe even just to stay functional, as that kind of gives for-profits a bad name, and not all for-profits are bad. It doesn't mean that they're bad people. They're just trying to make a living too. Portion of earned income returned to the investors to increase organizational fund balances. So they might have like a board of trustees, which Central has one too. And in the 60s, Medicare and Medicaid payments started coming about. And then there was an expanded market share. I'd say 2012 was the biggest expansion. Are you guys familiar with the Affordable Care Act at all? Because there really was I remember teaching in 2010 and saying, like, if you guys want to become a counselor or social worker, just be warned. We're in a great recession, like a depression almost right now. There's probably not many jobs for you. It was kind of sad. Like, we're studying to become social workers and counselors, and there's no money. Literally within a year and a half, the Affordable Care Act was passed, and like services blew up. Like, if you got Medicare or Medicaid, you're not going to get paid as much as a private insurance paid, but you'll still there's plenty of folks to go out and work with. So cruising through some of these about urban settings. So 85% of us live in a city. I feel like you guys all came from a city. I came from a city, Cincinnati. I went to Lexington for graduate school, and that felt like a country, or in the country, but it was a city. So 85% of us are there. 10% of the population actually live in New York and Los Angeles. So that's enormous. The top 4 cities are New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, and Houston.
Oh,
Yep. It's massive. Isn't that like 5 million, or is it more like, I know New York is like 10 million, I think.
Population wise.
Yeah. How many are in Chicago? I guess I could just ask Siri, or I'll type it. Let me see. Because I know. And that is funny, is when I lived in, okay. They're probably talking the city proper though. 2.7 million. I bet you if you did both the city and the like outskirts, which is probably what Wikipedia might do for you, I feel like it's 5, because Cincinnati's only 300,000, but with the outskirts of the city, we have 2 million. But inner city is only 300,000. So maybe I was wrong. Maybe people are leaving big cities. You get 58 million tourists a year. That's pretty terrible. I would almost be annoyed. Houston is probably going to become bigger soon. Huh. So I also found out somewhere in Cincinnati metropolitan housing authorities where we housed a lot of our refugees. That was also inner city. There it is. Metro area population of Chicago is 8,900,000. Does that sound more correct?
8.
Yeah.
Crazy.
So inner city, it's 2.7 million. But if you like count all the suburbs and where everybody else is, the metro area, like what would those places be called? Like Gary, Indiana? Is that part of it too? Is Gary, Indiana even close to Chicago or is it far away?
It's like,
Half hour? Okay. So I guess they would probably count all the way out to the border of Gary's pretty rough right now too, I
Yeah,
guess.
something about Indiana just makes me uncomfortable.
Right?
I don't know what it is.
Right.
Maybe like in a past life something bad happened.
It could be. It's, and again, that kind of goes into our ecological understanding of where we were brought up. Like we're all probably going to feel comfortable in different spaces too, which is interesting. You know what I mean? Like it's, when I lived in Nicaragua, it was also quite an awakening for me to just like understand dirt floor poverty too. Like I didn't ever live on a dirt floor until I lived down there. So that was just different.
How was the food?
I loved the food. It was weird that I was a vegetarian. Like they all got annoyed with me, but I ate a lot of beans, rice, and
Oh,
plantains,
that's good.
and a lot of carbs if you're vegetarian. It's all carbohydrates. So that was fun, and that's kind of where like I became. I was a psych major, and I fell in love with the idea of social work. And we were doing water filtration systems and latrines that stop the spread of malaria and like nutrition assistance. And a lot of it was right after Hurricane Mitch in 1999, and it was just rough down there. So Indy was even rougher, so I went there with Miami University. I don't think I got enough of international social work until I traveled to some of these spots. I was just so stuck in the United States. I never really thought outside of the borders. Have you guys traveled anywhere international? Canada?
That's not
Driving or flying?
Oh, driving. Because there's this little town. It's
Windsor?
really cool. It's really cool.
Where the Cuban cigars are? They slammed me against the wall and like pat me down and took my cigars away when I went to
Really?
Windsor. Oh yeah.
I don't remember being that.
And I found out why, and it's because I was talking shit the year before. I was like, it's funny, every time I've come through here, I brought through tons of Cuban cigars for my dad. And I said this to the whatever those dudes are called. And I shouldn't have said it because they obviously were putting it all down. I said, this one time I don't have any cigars on me, and you guys are searching everything heavily. And I even thought back another year before. I had a friend who lived in Montreal, so I'd visit him. Flight was only 100. And I had like a Planters peanut jar that looked kind of like this. And my friend was giving them up for New Year's resolution. And he was like cutting them up. And they're like $100 cigars. I'm like, dude, don't cut it. So I grabbed it. I put the $100 cigar in my little Planters peanut like this. And then I packed my bag. And I think it was plastic, so I was allowed to pack it. But when I got home, the cigar was gone. No note or anything. And that's why I said, the following year, like, it's funny, I've brought so many cigars and like, you guys never searched me. Now all of a sudden you're searching me. And it's because they had found the one. So then by saying that, I guess they found it like say in 2002. I got searched in 2003 and they didn't find anything, but I had confessed my sins and they wrote it down. And then in 2004, they literally ripped my car apart on the Windsor border. Like they looked under the seats, and I had them just right here in my jacket. Like I had it in the pocket like this. And they were like, they're rough when they search you. Like they do the crotch thing like real hard. They were assholes. I was like, holy shit. And then so I get there and they're like, here they are. And it's like a cigar. I'm like, okay. And they're like, so your fine is $105. Will that be Visa or MasterCard? And I was like, do I get to keep it if I pay the fine? They're like, no, you were talking all kinds of shit to our people a year ago. And that's what it was. And I didn't even realize I was just freely speaking. I just felt safe. And I'm like, it's funny every time I come through here and bring cigars, it's no big deal. And all of a sudden you guys are searching me like crazy. And then whatever I said, they typed it all in, slammed me against it was rough. I was like, dang, dude. For a cigar? Anyway, I did used to bring a bunch across the Mexican border. Like one time I brought 5 boxes and they filled them. And I remember him saying like, "Are you a missionary? You got Bibles or something?" I'm like, "Yeah, they're Bibles." And he's like, "Okay." He let me through. So it just depends. Yeah, the whole different experiences in different countries. Yeah.
Yeah. But they were so.
They were pissed at me. And ever since then, I've pretty much, I usually have my girlfriend or wife bring them over the border. You're not supposed to have the Cuban cigar, apparently. I don't know if you guys knew that. Because of the embargo in 1963 against Cuba.
The tax or something?
They are considered a communist nation.
I thought relations with Cuba.
They got better for a minute, but then I feel like they turned around again.
Was it Castro when he died?
Right.
Like, not recently, but like a couple years ago.
Oh, look, they're still talking about ending the Cuban embargo March of 23. Bipartisan Senate bill would end Cuban embargo.
Oh,
And it's been since 1963, so it's been 60 solid years. Interesting. I would show it to y'all, but I want to get through this. Like, there's 7 reasons to end the Cuban embargo. So you couldn't even buy cigars, but they had the best cigars. Then when I went to Dominican Republic, where Edison is from, we visited a tobacco plant with my dad, and I got all the seeds and like sprinkled them in his cigar case. You're allowed to have Dominican cigars. And I sprinkled all the seeds, and I grew tobacco in Kentucky. So I felt like a true Kentucky tobacco farmer for a minute there.
it's interesting. Like, yeah, I hear all the time, like, you know, rappers like Jay-Z talks about Cuban cigars.
Yeah,
I'm like,
they're famous.
okay.
They're just better. Yeah, it's just the best spot to grow tobacco, I think. And it is like a status symbol, is you'll pay like, you could buy them over there for $2, and then you get them here and they're worth $100. That's why, because of the embargo. So anyway, the taxes, I'm sure you guys have all had an experience with taxes, and we're like, why in the hell do I have to pay all this out of my paycheck? Because it's annoying. And why can I have all that money? That's usually what this is funding, is federal and state funding does supposedly pay for our healthcare, our social workers, our schools. That's more property tax. Now, there is something going on with the debt ceiling right now. I don't know if you guys have heard about that.
I was just listening to it on my class. They were talking about how they're going to end it and the welfare programs that they're implementing right now.
Yes.
I forgot. They said one was like, they're talking about like exemptions. I really should have paid attention, but I was crossing the street at the time, and how it's really temporary, like it's going to end in 2030. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I was listening to NPR.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So they'll cover it, and that often does pay for our, gosh, why am I blanking on it? Our schooling and our, the roads, the public services, the police, the fire department, all of the above, and social services. So it does have some things that pay for social workers. And what does your mom do for social work?
She is an intervention specialist right now.
Okay.
So,
But she has a BSW, or is it a LSW too?
I
A
don't know.
license? Which city?
Oh, yeah,
Some
she's
cities you
definitely
don't.
licensed.
She has a license. Okay.
She has a bunch of other stuff, but because I recently asked her, what do you do again? I don't
Right.
know. Maybe I'm not interested in my parents.
Right. Well, usually we I guess it goes one of two ways. Everybody wants to be like their parents, or they're like, hell no, I don't want to do anything that you do.
Yep, too late. I'm already following her.
Right. Yeah. And then you end up in the end kind of following any of your all's parents, social workers or counselors, or okay. So getting to funding and local taxes. Well, United Way is a good example too, is they ask for both taxes and donors' contributions. Grants is one we cover in my Practice 2 course, But there's a lot of different grants that will fund lots of different things. Central State gets a ton of different grants for different stuff. One of them being our food pantry we wrote for. We're pretty sure we're not going to get that funded, which sucks, but we're going to keep trying.
Why don't you think?
Because we heard somebody in criminal justice already won that grant, so that would mean that we didn't win that grant. And it's okay. I get it. They probably want like forensics research, which is what she's doing, and it probably sounds more like research than funding a food pantry. Like they're not fully connecting in our minds what the food pantry would do for the ability to research food deserts and food insecurities and whatnot. They're probably thinking we're just asking for a handout to give a handout. And that's not necessarily what it is. We're trying to connect back all of the dots to the food desert that's around here. Like you guys see it. There ain't nothing to buy around here at all that I'm aware of, unless if I'm missing something.
Are there any co-ops near you?
Like in Wilberforce, you think?
Yeah, I just see.
Is it like a food co-op?
Yeah, there are a few, but not.
Mostly in the big city? Right. Is that where you like pay into it and then as they harvest, they give you veggies? And yeah, those are kind of nice. We should have one. That's a good question. I don't know if they would be good enough to have it online yet. But you did know every Tuesday they have that free store food bank truck come here.
No, I didn't.
Yes.
Like, isn't it like the first Tuesday?
First Tuesday. I'm sorry.
Oh, wait. No. Wait, yesterday was the first. Okay, so next Tuesday.
So it'll probably be next Tuesday.
Yeah.
So the second Tuesday of the month, and often the food we grow here gets passed out through there. So, yeah, staffing patterns. So social workers, just like I had said to you guys, you could get a bachelor's in social work. In your senior year, you qualify to take the license in social work. So that's the first level of licensure, BSW, LSW. The next level is MSW, LSW. So Master of Social Work, which is 1 year after you get your bachelor's. And you can get the master's level licensure and then start doing towards your 2 years of an independent license. And that's where you probably will double your pay instead of a BSW, you can become independently licensed and you can be a therapist and own your own private practice. So that's what they're describing here. The association called National Association of Social Workers, that's the NASW, where you're going to look up the Code of Ethics for this second paper overall and first this week. Has the specific credentials. They have set standards of practice, not legally binding. They've got paraprofessionals also, and a lot of folks do that with their associates. Associates and the Chemical Dependency Counselor Assistantship, that's called a CDCA. There's a lot of grassroots involvement in like poverty and doing case management and stuff. You actually don't need a bachelor's of social work, and you could get the addictions license. It's the CDCA or LCDC, Licensed Chemical Dependency Counselor, or a Chemical Dependency Counselor Assistant. And then also some folks rely on volunteers, especially at food pantries, maybe at homeless shelters. You've got several volunteers, policy making volunteers. They may go and do legislature stuff. Administrative volunteers might help with the paperwork or accounting. And this is how you run a full agency with like all of you need a person or a very smart one person that can do all of these things. So like administrative, policy making, advocacy volunteers, and then the direct service volunteers. So sometimes you'll see that in a food pantry or at a homeless shelter, somebody does all of these, but it's best if you had 4 people that could break those up. Like somebody might like math better than others. A lot of us get into social work and psychology because we don't like math as much. Or taking a foreign language. Did you guys know that you don't need a foreign language? Do they tell you that?
I didn't figure that out until I took the first class.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what everybody's saying. Like,
Wait, what?
you don't need a foreign language to graduate.
But that's what's on the sheets, like all of them.
That's how they trick you. Or you have the old sheet. Have you taken yours yet?
I'm literally fighting for my life in Spanish.
That's what he just said. And that's what my wife just said. She said the class sucked. It was mind tap.
And
It was
it's
bullshit.
literally- and
And
it's like-
turnkey for the teacher, but not for the student.
But I'm like, how am I supposed to comprehend any of this Spanish?
Without
almost
somebody
is-
teaching you it.
Yeah, I mean.
Uh-huh. She got a C. She was pissed. It fucked up her GPA.
Oh, I got a C too last year. That's my
She was
bad.
pissed.
Because I think also that time, like we had that weird hacking situation.
Oh.
So they had like locked my account. I couldn't get into like Microsoft, anything.
That
Like,
stinks.
everything was closed. And so I didn't realize my project that I had submitted.
Was saved on Microsoft.
Yeah, or it did
OneDrive.
something weird. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was saved, but then also it submitted weird.
That
Like,
sucks.
I don't know what happened. And then he said, well, you gotta see, so be happy.
Which one did you have? I know there's like
His
3.
name was John, I think.
Sounds like an adjunct.
Yeah, he was not cool.
It sucks because we only passed that about a year and a half ago. As social workers, we always have translators. It would be great to be a Spanish speaker, but it's more important to finish your degree and have a good GPA to get into grad school. Not have 2 C's from fucking Spanish. That's why my wife's pissed. She's like, I took it when I lived in Nicaragua, so I feel like I cheated. Like I had to learn it down there just to like go to the bathroom. So
I mean, but that's good because you're like actively being able to engage
Right.
in the language. I'm over here yelling into a mic.
yes, that's what she was saying too.
Cabeza.
And then it judges your pronunciation,
And then
right?
it's like, yeah, and then I'm like, well, it's not, I'm saying the word right because then you play back, it's cabeza. I'm
Uh-huh.
like, cabeza.
Uh-huh.
And it's like, nope. And no, fourth try, it's like, okay, yeah,
That is messed up.
sucks.
But I know the
Yeah.
Spanish department hates us and Edison because we all passed that. Like, social workers always have a translator. When I worked with the refugees at St. Leo's, I didn't speak Kurundi, but we had a translator from TriHealth that helped us communicate.
Sure, I'd love to learn new languages, but I don't know.
Yeah. It's a bummer that you don't find out until you're like half done with all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you already took one?
I was in the process of taking one, but it was online and there's no way I can learn Arabic.
Did you drop it?
Ah, there's
Yes,
someone
I would have
that
dropped
really-
it. I would have dropped it so quick.
How do you say?
That stinks.
Um,
That's insane though, just the whole
Long.
okay, I don't want to gloss over this quickly, but there's a lot of challenges in service delivery system too. And that this is some of the stuff you might have even been talking about last week with social workers, like the bureaucratic disentitlement, like reductions through policy retrenchment, covertly reduces programs and services through changes in social policies, no opportunity for public hearings or input from customers. That's just one of 5. We're going to go through all of them. Privatization, so government support of private profit and not-for-profit services is not always there. It reduces the government footprint in numerous fields of services. Competitive funding, so it results in scarcity for resources for less powerful agencies. So it does become hard to like start your own private practice or like run your own agency. Yes.
Yeah, so I actually emailed my advisor today about majoring social or double majoring. She said actually it's gonna push me back even further, so I probably shouldn't. But I have a sheet that says as of fall 22, it has foreign language 1 and foreign language 2 as a requirement. So
Really?
my confusion is why she's saying it's gonna push me back that much when I'm really just taking a bunch of electives. Like I don't need
Right.
the classes.
Are they required electives though, do you think?
No,
Like
I
you
don't
have to
think
take
art.
art and you
Oh.
have to, I don't know. Let me see here.
Well, I mean, we can decide.
Is
I
art
don't-
one of them?
Well, not for for sociology. No.
Like usually we all have the same. You've got 2 English right there. You've got 1 math.
Mhm.
You've got 1 philosophy. That's a weird one. You've got psych and sociology, so you've already taken those. And you need another one out of that. So it would be like, whatever. You do need these 2 sciences, which sucks. A lot of times that's what we miss. You need computer skills, you need PE, which is weird. You don't need this stuff. For a BA degree, you do, but for a BS, you do not. Although this is an old check sheet and it does say still that you need it. We have graduated many a person without, well, you already know, you don't need what's the language? I guess any language, right? 2 of some language.
Arabic.
So you've already taken your 2 already, though.
I'm taking Spanish too right now.
And you can't drop it. He found out already you can't drop it. You could probably get a W, but you'd still pay for it. So it wouldn't be like a beneficial droppage. It would just say W and you pay $2,000 for it, which is stupid.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, which sucks. But so you still could do like we were saying, where you would finish your sociology and take as many of these as you want. And if you ever wanted to just like finish 2 or 3 of them in the summer and 4 or 5 in the fall, you could have them all done. So it's totally up to you.
I have room.
I know, right,
I'll figure it out.
right. And I understand too, a lot of majors don't like us poaching. So that's why I always say double major. Like, don't drop your major. Don't piss anybody else off. Like, and obviously it's your full choice, however route you want to go. And if you just want to do your first year of these classes in graduate school, you can do that too.
Well, I like the idea of Miami, but I'm just trying to navigate if I would be able to participate in the same like programming that they have for Central students who come out of social work.
So the only way you qualify for that is that advanced standing program that he has back there, that sheet, you do have to have a bachelor's in social work. But if you don't, all you're doing is you're going to take these you've already taken these 2, you said. You're going to take human behavior 1 and 2 and practice 1, 2, and 3, and then do your practicum there. So no matter what, you need 900 hours of practicum. I did all of mine in graduate school. But people that got a BSW do half of theirs here first. They do 400 or 4 with like Dr. Hunt. You would do your practicum with Dr. Hunt across the street. So you can, but you also don't have to. And then if you are graduating with a soc degree or a psych degree, or like what I did, you could also do counseling, which is the same amount of time, like the mental health counseling that UC offers. That's a 2-year program, or the MSW in social work is a 2-year program. So the choice is yours. If it is cheaper though to get these done at Central State, I would just do
I'm
these.
still trying to wait. I don't. No offense.
Uh-huh.
No offense.
I get it. Because you could be starting graduate school at this time next year almost. There's an online, so the other program that actually is really freaking cool, I think, that's where Nikita's getting her doctorate. It's called the UK MSW. That's where I went. Apparently it's online now, which is kind of funny. And then, are you all in person or online people?
I prefer to be in person.
Right. So, and you can start, I bet they have rolling admissions here. So you can, most of these you want to apply by November or December to get like funding opportunities and money and all of that stuff. And I think you qualify still for the money at Miami though, if that's what you're asking. So then it would be $8,000 a year instead of $24,000 a year.
Yeah.
That's a good chunk of cash off the tuition, I think. And you could apply here too. This is a fun one. It is down in Lexington, but it is online. So it's like, which one do you want to do? And Nikita's finishing her doctorate this time next year. She'll be Dr. Nikita. Yeah. And she's a Central State graduate, so it's cool. They are a good program. So UK, Miami of Ohio, even, did you hear that we have a visit to University of Cincinnati in the fall? And so we charter a bus down to UC, and they pay for our hotel and then food and meals to visit UC for their MSW program, if you wanted to check that out too. So we have funding for that. They also have, they say it's the same scholarships for Central students. They say it will be like, they'll give you at least 10,000 a year, so that the MSW only costs you like 8 or 9 or 10 a year. I feel like they all play with the numbers though when it's like all said and done. It's the way Central is with tuition. They try to get as much tuition out of you while at the same time giving you as much money as they can, where it's not just enough, but always just enough. So I hate that. And that's why I just always took out student loans too. But so yeah, in the fall, we'll have that. Perdomo may come this year, so we would bring psychology students. I'm sure we can bring sociology students too. It's just visiting their MSW program. And Ebony, who used to teach here, will show you guys around. They usually take you like around campus, feed you, hotel, October and November-ish. So that's kind of cool, actually. It's like it feels like a little vacation in the fall at UC in Cincinnati. So don't let us forget that we've told you about that. It used to be only the social work students. I was like, wait a minute, I was a psych student. If somebody didn't tell me about social work, I would have never learned about a master's in social work. Are there any good psychology master's programs? They're not really heavily recruiting or anything. They're like, I wouldn't know either. I went right into my MSW. I wish I got my stupid bachelor's in social work. I was so pissed that I paid double the tuition in 3 years of my life that could have been 1 year of my life. So other challenges of funding, besides competitive funding and whatnot, social triage, so classify and screen clients for eligibility, maybe financial constraints or other service limitations. In the past, you would get denied by a social service provider because you didn't have money and funding. It still happens, but it's happening less often since Affordable Care Act. Unintended consequences, like clients may interpret there's nothing we can do there's nothing to be done. So that's different, because if they're saying there's nothing we can do, there might be an agency that can help you. And if you're hearing there's nothing can be done, you're like, there ain't no agency out there that can help me. I quit looking for help now. So the idea is to not give up. Final two challenges are like fragmentation, so funding linked to categorically driven programs, eligibility requirements limit access, the fewer options create service gaps and barriers. Scarcity of money reduces funding for planning and coordination. And then cost effectiveness becomes cost containment, where like you don't have as many services to help out. The last one is optimal social service delivery. Should be comprehensive and universal, addresses both short and long-term needs, adopts clear procedures, ensures client participation and decision-making, involves broad use of representation in determining policies, assesses outcomes for quality and effectiveness, and allocates adequate funding. The debt ceiling is supposed to be, do you guys know about our national debt at all? Do you know about money creation? How is money created?
Isn't it just printed by the Federal Reserve?
It really is. And there's some amazing videos about that is good to know. Because money used to not always be debt, but at the current model and system we have right now, for every dollar that's created, there's $1 of debt owed to the Federal Reserve System. Whereas in the past, when money was a silver US dollar, you had silver dollars, it was actually an asset. It was more like pirate's treasure in a sense. As like money was gold until 1933 in the US, and money was silver until 1971 in the US. But
Didn't the stimulus package, the what
Our
that-
STEMI checks.
Thank you. I was trying to
The
figure
STEMI
out
checks
that.
were printed out the
Didn't they
wazoo.
help, though, with-
They did temporarily help.
so-
They did temporarily help because I was excited as hell to get mine. However, had I known all the gas and bread and milk would double in price within the 2 years, I could have done without it. I would have drank water instead of freaking milk. I know that you do need like proteins for a baby forming, but we had something around 4 or 5 trillion in circulation in 2019, and then they printed 4 trillion in 2020. So the double money supply became, we had the same amount of goods being chased by twice as much money. Therefore, everything doubled in price. If that may, have you seen inflation on anything?
Mhm.
Any of your favorite foods,
Oh, definitely.
gas, housing?
Almond milk? I'm sorry. I
That
think
shit's
it-
expensive.
Regular milk. I'm like, it has never been as much. Even at Aldi, like, come on. Like,
So have you seen one of these ticker clocks that they used to have on the national debt?
I think I saw it for like.
Oh, here it is. It did. That is, this is crazy. Have you? It's just crazy that like, so it should give us anxiety. Like, can you imagine that's 31 trillion, 822 billion, 829 million, 400,000, and it would be nice to have that every half a second. So a lot of it is debt per citizen is 95. I have 491,000 with my house, student, car, and van. 491. It was over 500. Actually, for a moment, I owned 2 houses because I sold my house a month later. It showed up on, you guys, have you downloaded the free debt ticker also for yourself? Well, like, so for yourself, so you can stay in the know to get like a better credit score. Do you have either Credit Sesame, Credit Karma, or you do? Okay. So for a minute, mine said 651 as I owned 2 houses, but then I sold my Kennedy Heights home. I think I'm only at 90 now, but 291 is student loan debt. 160 is houses. I think 40 is cars. Ooh, they just killed my credit scores. I put too much on the credit card this month. It still says it's good, but it went down 30 points. They're scared. Oh, I'm at 492. And so it shows you like student loans are 292, 296. Oh, shoot. Do we have to pay those next month? No. Auto loans is at 32,000. Credit cards are at 8. God. So the sad thing to me is I know that there's $1 trillion in Medicare liabilities and Social Security is $1 trillion, but war is 700. That was weird that I just clicked on that and it did that. Defense. Why does it do that? U.S. debt derived by, does it tell you a definition? Social Security, defense. Okay. Total money spent for all the branches of the military, including black budgets, equipment, operations, maintenance, and personnel and war. So we have, it's almost $1 trillion. I remember when we were complaining it was 500 billion. And then the interest is even more frightening because that was 0% this last year.
And then is this money that we owe ourselves, money that we owe other countries?
So this could be a whole nother class, but
I know we owe China a bunch.
we do. They buy our treasuries. This is a good thing to know. So this is also a big social worker thing to know is like, where the hell are all of these fundings and liabilities coming from? Like, how do I start my own business? How do I get access to funds? How do I feed my family by running my own business? But there's a lot of videos that would explain it. I can recommend to you guys. It would just like put you to sleep. But it is so good to know. Like the one that I like the best is called Zeitgeist. and I think that means like the breath of the ghost.
Yeah, like Geistes goes.
Yeah. And they talk about the Federal Reserve System and
This is making me.
but it's important to know how your things are. Okay, let's do a 2-minute one. I got a 2-minute one instead of your hour video, but like how money is created. It's usually debt based. If you put $100 in the bank, guess how much the banks can lend out to somebody else? Ten times that.
When a bank extends a loan, it creates money. Let's say that I want to buy a very expensive watch of 100,000 euros and I don't have the money. I can go to a bank and ask for a consumption loan. If they're a good bank, they say no, that we're not going to give you the consumption loan to buy this expensive watch. But if they do give me it, they don't give me a bag of money. They will just take my credit card, my passport, perhaps there will be something done on a computer keyboard, some signatures, that's it, right? I walk away with a watch on my wrist, very happily, supposedly. Now, at this point, money has been created. This money didn't exist this morning when I got up and decided to buy the watch, take out the loan. That's new money, fresh money. That's how banks create money. Banks bring new money into the economy as they make up loans. Therefore, if you expand the stock of money, you also expand the stock of debt. Right? Basically, the banks sit there, they wait for deposits to arrive, and if they have enough deposits, they lend them out to somebody else. And that is completely wrong. This is the wrong model of banks, because what happens in reality is exactly the opposite. And I've done this, I'm a banker, I know that that's how it works, and you can read it on many central bank websites, that's how it works. So banks, when they decide the economy is good, we are optimistic, we are now making loans, they don't need to wait for any deposits, because when they make a loan, they create the deposit. Right there, banks create money out of thin air.
So it's weird as you think of like, what does money buy for us? Like food, water, shelter, like a warm place and a full belly tonight is kind of what we all need. Understanding some of the economics is important to knowing how like social work systems work and how interest rates were 0 a year ago. I don't know if you guys remember some of that. Like it was able to be borrowed. My house mortgage is 3%, and then interest rates doubled this year. So they are 6%. So my house that I pay $1,155 a month for, if I bought it today, would cost me $2,100 a month for. There's no way I could afford that. No way. So I'm not moving, I'm not buying a new house, I'm not even selling. Even though I could sell my house for a little bit more, there's no way. Because if I got an interest rate at 6% compared to 3%, it's twice as expensive. And therefore, the economy could crash. And they're trying to slow down the economy because during COVID, what they did was print money, give out money. We all got stimmy checks. Everybody's happy. Cryptocurrencies went way up in price. Even gold and silver went way up in price. But then also food and water and milk went up in price and gas went up in price. And like the cost of a new car is like way up in price. So I don't know if I'm totally explaining it. It's probably making sense, but it's very hard to explain, like the creation of the monetary system. And if we get it back to simplicity that we need a warm house and a full belly tonight, we don't have as much debt. I'm probably the worst one to speak on debt as I took out every student loan that was offered to me. I probably should have said no. I didn't. I was young and dumb and wanted to have fun back then. So I'm like, yeah, sure, that's nice. In graduate school, you get $21,000 a year to go to graduate school. I was in graduate school for 10 or 11 years. So from 04 until 2016. So 12 years times 21,000. That was my student loan debt. So when you do ecological system perspective, you consider access to money, access to loans, access to how do we pay for all of these things? So I also bought my house on a student loan. I bought my solar panels on a student loan. I bought everything that was important to live off of in a student loan. I'm not saying it's the right or wrong way to do it, but that's just what life presented me with. I needed a place to live. I found a house for $109,000. I took half my student loans in 2005, which was $21,000. Half was about $11,000. I put it down on the house, and I bought a house. I owed $500 a month on it. I had 4 bedrooms. I rented out 2 rooms to friends at $300 and $300. So I feel like I created my own business and system and how to survive. It wasn't the best way to go about it. I took out a ton of student debt to do it, but I do currently have a house that I owe $150 on. They say it's worth $300, and I have solar panels on it, and I can plug my car into those solar panels and drive it up here, and then plug it in up here and then drive it home. So it feels sustainable, even though it started with debt creation. It was a lot of debt, the student loans. Do they still give you guys the same for like freshman year, you get like $5,000, sophomore you get about 7, junior year you get like 9, and senior year you get 10 grand?
I'm
Okay. And then in grad school you get 21,000 a year. It's just crazy. Because I was in my MSW program for 3 years. I got an MA in theology and pastoral counseling at the same time that I got my doctorate in counseling, and that was for an additional 8 to 9 years. So it was a lot of debt.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Ideally, it will be forgiven in 3 years. 291,000, which is crazy. That's like more than $250,000. You know what I mean? Like, but I've had to live pretty simply in the meantime. Like, just So these are the values in social work that I wanted to cruise through, because this is what your paper is on. And you'll see some of the values you can pick out now, and even use these definitions and quote the book if you want to. So values defined are like implicit, explicit ideas about what a group considers ideal. For us, it shapes our beliefs, our emotions, our attitudes. Sometimes there's complex networks, direct behavior associated with values, like caring for the poor or feeding the hungry or how visiting the imprisoned. People may agree on abstract value and disagree on the translation of what that value is. Like, some people are like, well, if I feed the hungry, maybe I should teach them to fish or something like that. You know what I mean? And there's no right or wrong answer on that anyway. So here's some of the values and how they came about. Foundation of Professional Social Work, that was probably like 1909. Actually, even before that, 19th century was 1899. The morality of clients. We wanted to reform individuals. Character and morality of clients distinguish worthy and unworthy poor. That was like the old way of looking at, like, there was worthy poor and unworthy poor. The contemporary shift is like moral imperatives of the profession. That was in the 1920s. There was a conference they had. It raised significant questions about values of social work and remains relevant to contemporary practice. We don't judge people why they're poor. We still might judge them, but we might not want to say that out loud to them. You know what I mean? Like, you're poor as you buy all that bullshit Mountain Dew and cigarettes. Like, you don't need to be buying Mountain Dew and cigarettes ever. Like something like that. And it's like, they are human and allowed to pick what they want to buy. And, like, they're here for help, so we're going to help them. So the core values of social work reflect fundamental beliefs about the intrinsic worth of humans. We focus on social justice and then also human dignity and the worth of individuals. So it's almost the same as in counseling, they call it unconditional positive regard. A person comes to me, they need help. I want to judge the shit out of them, but I really shouldn't. You know what I mean? Like, I'm there to empathize and understand what's going on and maybe offer a solution to their poverty, homelessness, food insecurity, hunger. So abstract values must be interpreted and then translated into concrete actions. And you'll see this when you download the NASW Code of Ethics. Because it's 100 pages. Obviously, you don't have to read the whole thing, but you can get the brief of it and like, which value are we focusing on here? There are sociocultural milieu and values, so broad context for social work interaction. There's a dominant belief system that influences social welfare and shapes attitudes about clients and services. So one is the humanitarian approach, that you have a right to services, that like you should be cared for and taken care of and saved, whatever that looks like. So support for social and economic reform. The punitive approach is more like recipients are at fault and then they're stigmatized. Like, you buy too many Mountain Dew and cigarettes, I'm not fucking helping you. Like that's one route to go about it, is I think you can buy Mountain Dew on food stamps and could be judged for it. And then cigarettes, maybe you sell your food stamps for 2 for 1, so you can buy a pack of whatever. I'm just giving an example, but that's like sometimes what we'll see when we see clients. And I'm not here to judge them, but that is we're human, so our first thing is to go to judgment. You know what I mean? Like, well, we need to change some things. But as social workers, we're not there to give advice either. Like, we can share an experience with it, but we're not going to like tell them what to do. We can offer like several options. So the value context of social work, there's the value in the social work profession. It helps guide relationships between practitioners and clients. You want to balance sociocultural values and standards, and then the client's legitimate interests. And then sometimes the authority of helping professions conferred by society. That's why in the Code of Ethics, they talk about not having a relationship with your client ever in your entire life, because you're in a position of power over your client. So it does seem unjust to then begin a relationship with them in such a vulnerable form. Whereas a lawyer, maybe you are in a vulnerable position, but like a lawyer sometimes is like maybe helping you buy a house or look over a contract, and they say 3 years you can't have a relationship with your client. I think MD, somehow it's like 5 years. And then social work, when I was taught, it was for life. It could have changed since then, but they're like, never have a relationship with somebody you gave therapy to, because you like got inside their headspace and they were vulnerable, and you're not to abuse that power. So that could be one of the ones that you vibe with in your paper. The other example I gave that you don't vibe with is like no physical contact. Like you can't hug your client when they're crying. A lot of people are like, oh, I would like to be able to hug them. Me as a male, I've always chosen not to, because it's already a weird position to be in. So I'll go as far as like a fist bump, and that's it. Because there's already enough shit out there to be accused of. It's better. I do follow that one strictly. Some people counsel differently, and they're okay with like hugging and things of that nature. So it's a good example for some, not a great example for others. Agency and values is often reflected in their mission statement. So you guys can find that probably on the International Federation of Social Work, and also NASW, they'll have a mission statement. It will reflect their founding values, defines the purpose of the agency, priorities for programs and services. Their PowerPoints are so freaking long. The obligation is to uphold values of profession as detailed in the professional standards. So like there's a lot, and following all of them is hard, but the longer you practice in psychology and in sociology and in social work and in counseling, you start to learn what's appropriate, what's not, and what you're comfortable with and what you're not. You also, have you guys ever been shown how you can look up licenses that were suspended for not following what do you think the number one thing people lose their license for in social work or counseling?
Is it like violating their like confidentiality?
Sometimes it's even simpler than that, which is kind of annoying. It's not doing your CEUs, continuing education units. So every 2 years you have to do.
Is it like getting re-licensed?
Yes. So CE broker, I don't know if it will remember my sign in. I was going to show, I just found out as a teacher, we can count our classes as 10. You need to have 30 every 2 years. I can also count one of my publications as 10, and you always need ethics and you always need supervision. I don't know if it will remember. I was going to try to show you guys mine. It's not going to remember it because it's the wrong computer. But most people forget to do your continuing education units, but a good agency will provide you those for free. When you work at the agency, they'll give you ethics, they'll give you supervision, they'll give you boundaries training, they'll give you multicultural training, they'll give you all of those so you don't lose your license, because they're worthless without you not having a license. So it's important to keep it. So value context in social work, presenting problem and values, intersystem conflicts with conflicts about presenting problem. The value may conflict between systems, intrasystem conflicts about present problem, value conflicts within a system, presenting problem judged as immoral. So one that they are big on is the relationship, sexual contact with a client. That one doesn't have as many gray areas, but when we do speak of ethics, a lot of times we do say it is a gray area for interpretation. Like it's going to give you like kind of what you need to follow. And then you know, like whenever you get an ethical scenario, and you'll see that when you write the paper with like the Dolgoff ethical scenario, that you're going to end up being the judge of it, you and your supervisor. So the best final answer is you always need to check with your supervisor, no matter what, even until you're independently licensed or when you're a supervisor yourself, you'll still have some authority you answer to, like the board or the code. And you just want to check with your supervisor, you know, like check, double check, and quadruple check, because we think we get to a point where we're like at the top of the heap, but it's still good to check with somebody else and just be accountable to somebody. So we also have our own personal values. So it could be, you know, the big hot button one we often see is abortion. Maybe you don't want to work with a client dealing with abortion because it's personal to you, and you may pass that client to another social worker that is okay working with the abortion. And you could have your own personal values, your own spiritual values, your own several layers of values. So you're going to examine your personal values and then confront personal biases. That's kind of what we do in the assignment, where we go out and try to experience a place where we're not the normal person there. Like for me, it was easy at the University of Kentucky because I was a city boy. So I got to go out and observe what the country folk look like. And they could tell I was a city boy too, which was weird. I'm like, how the hell do they know? But they just know. They like know how you dress, or they know how you talk, or they know all of it. And then how do I deal with that as a practitioner? Like, do I get pissed about it and react and yell at them? Or am I able to be patient with it and roll with it? Because as a social worker, psychologist, sociologist, or counselor, I'm going to see people from every different race, ethnicity, religion, and culture. And so self-awareness is critical. That's kind of where they're going to at the end. Like, we may see where our sources of bias was. It could be how we were brought up. We could have had parents or friends or family or a school that kind of brought biases upon us. We're going to have both similarities and differences between clients and social workers. And that's why essentially the self-awareness is critical. And that's why I have the final paper is just a self-awareness essay. I think I've already put it in there for you guys, but just answering questions about yourself. And then ethics defined, like what is right, what represents values and action, systemized in codes and conduct. We've got also microethics, which is the standards and principles that direct practice. It could be confidentiality. And there's macroethics, like concerns with organizational arrangements and social policy. Like, should everybody have the right to healthcare? Should we have done the Affordable Care Act? Is it a basic need in life, just like water and housing and food is? You know, like people argued both sides of that up and down, like all day long, and they still do. You know what I mean? Like you'll see it different state by state still. Then you get into the code of ethics, and the idea is that it prescribes expectations for proper conduct, guides your decision making as a social worker, psychologist, sets standards for assessing competence, helps regulate your professional behavior, and then is a critical component of licensing and regulation. Like that's how they hold us accountable. Like if we have a private practice, we're just trying to like bring in a honey trap and find like a new person to date every time we see a private practitioner client, we're probably going to lose our license. You know what I mean? Like that's not what the social work or psychologist licenses for, or counseling license. Like, we're there to follow a code of ethics. And so it does guide your professional conduct. It sets standards for adjudication of legal issues. It delineates principles related to responsibilities. I know they're all big words, but to clients, to colleagues, in practice settings, as colleagues, as we hold each other accountable sometimes. And let's see here. Any questions on this? Is any of this flowing or making sense, or is it totally?
That would make sense.
I just wanted to clear this for at least the next two papers, because this is why people do what they do and why it like kind of originated from a spirituality, or like the first social workers were from like churches, because like they went back to even something of they saw the divine in each and every human. Like you saw a piece of God in every human that you saw, and that's why you wanted to treat everybody as a piece of the divine. You know, like that's so why you do see a lot of social service agencies coming out of the church and spiritual organizations, and the Buddhists and the Catholics and the Jews and the Muslims and the Hindus and the. Did I cover the 5 major religions?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. Oh, here's another ethical principle. So acceptance. This is the one that's kind of the judgy one. Treat everybody humanely and with consideration, dignity, and respect. Is conveyed by expression of genuine concern, receptive listening, climate of mutual respect, and roots in agape, or love that is accepting. That's getting into philosophy like eros and agape. When you start talking eros and agape, they're going deep. Individualization, so recognizes uniqueness. And that's why if somebody wants to get Mountain Dew and cigarettes every day, they're allowed to get Mountain Dew and cigarettes every day. You know, like I want to be pissed at my grandpa who died of lung cancer. And then empathetically, I hear that the military gave him 2 packs of cigarettes in World War II every single day and became severely addicted to them. And that was how they like had sent less food rations, because if you smoked, you ate less. And if you, you know, stuff like that. But I wanted to be mad at him for being a smoker in 1981 when he died. But he was given those in 1945 and smoked for almost 40 years. As an 18-year-old, you know. So we allow for self-determination. It's called self-determination. They can make their own choices. And that's hard sometimes, you know, especially when you're dealing with alcoholism or addictions or all the challenges that we do confront. So social workers focus on this client in this situation. We avoid stereotyping and labeling. Although, again, we are human and it does happen. And like the key is like maybe keeping it up here and not having to blurt it out every time you do. So that's how we do know our own self and what we were brought up with. So personalized understanding, undivided attention, purposeful expression of feelings, moves beyond the facts to be understood. The full dimensions of situations, promotes constructive actions, and letting the client choose for themselves, and then having objectivity. So examine situations without bias and closely related to non-judgmentalism. Hey, look at that. We're 2/3 done, and I'm going to crush this before 3. Watch me. Ethical principles, non-judgmental attitudes, presume acceptance, not judged as either good or bad, worthy or unworthy. Critical, though, we could be at the beginning of a working relationship. If a client feels stigmatized, they might not come back to you. You're like, you were the asshole who said I can't have a Mountain Dew and cigarettes. And right now, it's the only thing that gives me relief in life. Like I just quit smoking this every day and drinking that every day. And now I'm just doing legal shit. That's, yeah.
Or could that, I mean, their habits also be part of that ecological factor we were talking about earlier? Like, well, I was just looking up like, oh, well, is there a co-op near here? Like, where can we get like decent fruits and vegetables? Like, no, Speedway. Like,
Right,
So
right,
Mountain Dew.
right.
Maybe a banana.
Stuff that's processed, of course. Yeah. Yep. And that's why, yes, using your ecological mindset to like look at the problem, see if there's a solution, find out if like the civic garden centers around here and we have a green space to grow our own vegetables, or like make that a part of our food pantry that you can give out seeds to and grow your own vegetables, or grow them in your windowsill, or grow them on your porch. Does not exclude social workers from exercising professional judgment. So if it is a harm situation, like situations where people don't choose for themselves, either the elderly or kids, that is sometimes when social workers get involved with adult protective services or child protective services. But ideally, they are working ultimately for family reunification. It doesn't mean they want to snatch everybody's kids up, but they do want to make sure the kid is safe until both the kid and the mom, or kid and the dad, can come back together and function safely together. Like knowing that there's food, knowing that there's a safe space for them to go to, knowing that the cupboards are full. Overall, and I have some foster care and foster to adopt videos I want to show, but it probably won't be until 10 days from now when I get back. Oh, I guess it is on the 12th. So it's Friday the 2nd. I'll be back Monday the 12th. And just some of the family things that come up if the kids are snatched up. And that's usually what social workers are accused of. Like, you just take all the kids all the time. Well, yes, it's true, but I was actually the social worker that was in charge of family reunification to teach the counseling skills and the survival skills that we can all live together as one happy family and everyone's needs are met. So controlled emotional involvement impeded by over-identification and cold objectivity, achieved through empathy. I always say counseling is a balance between empathy and challenge, and you'll do it all day. Empathy, empathizing with their situation, and then challenging their situation. And if I empathize too much all the time, I'm a total pushover and I'm just like, oh. And if I challenge them too much, I'm a total asshole and I'm just like telling them what to do. So if I balance empathy and then challenge, like, why don't you consider applying to 5 jobs in the next 5 days? And then empathy, like, yeah, I know the job market sucks right now and it's hard. And then challenge, why don't you look in the other area of that job market? So you're balancing between having empathy for them and then also challenging them to lift them up and ultimately empowering them to empower themselves. So we don't empower other people, but we empower them to empower themselves. So empathy is distinguished from sympathy, where we feel like others. It fails to recognize uniqueness. Or pity, which is feeling sorry for others, like undermines a sense of competence. So empathy is the big, you'll hear a ton about empathy and self-determination in social work. And self-determination is that the clients need freedom to make choices and decisions. And like you said, it might be the only fluids they can buy here that's like Mountain Dew because of Speedway.
I mean, they can also get water, but I'm just saying.
Right, but the water
Yeah.
kind of sucks too. Like, you drink some of the water. I use even after the Brita, it tasted funny enough. I had to buy this little powder I dumped in that tasted like watermelon. Like, I filtered the water and it was a Brita and I poured it in. I'm like, so now I could stomach it, but I need something to hydrate my system for an ecological balance. But yeah. So clients need freedom to make their own choices. Social workers guide rather than maneuver. We don't tell you what to do, but we can guide and say, well, there's this option, there's that option, there's that. And then some limitations are, though, like legal restrictions. There might be different agency rules or a set of standards, also eligibility requirements, and then the ability to make decisions. If their IQ is lower than 70, you might really need to guide them a bit more than others. or even maneuver them if sometimes there is. When I worked with folks with developmental disabilities, I did have to work more intensively than with somebody who had an IQ that was more like 85, 95, or 105. You know what the average IQ is, right? Did you guys get that anywhere? It's 100. And then one standard deviation away from the mean is 15. So 85 is a little less smart. 115 is a little more smart. And most people fall 2 standard deviations in statistics. So 130 or 70. Below 70 is retarded, and they may have a different terminology for it now. And above 130 is like genius. So like you can see, they say every year you're in college, you add a point to your IQ. So we could come in here at 120 something, 125, and you could do 4 years and be 129. In grad school, you get up to 131. But it just depends. Maybe I ate too many lead paint chips growing up as I had,
Gosh.
you know. We had them. They were fun to crunch on. I was like,
Stop.
it's true. I grew up in a food desert, and we had old ass housing with paint chips all over that windowsill.
Cincinnati?
Yeah. Oh yeah. It sounds terrible, but it is also true.
You said they were fun, didn't you?
They were. We did some messed up stuff though growing up. So, you know. 5 kids, you can't keep track of all of them. We notice that with 3 right now. Like she's already like, you done yet? 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 And I'm like, yeah, I'm coming. I'm coming. I get it. I mean, she's tired. We're all tired. So confidentiality, that's probably the biggest one. Because again, when I tell a friend and they go gossip shit to somebody else, it's not very helpful. So if I go tell anybody's other shit to somebody else and break their confidentiality, I want to do more harm than good. So it's the foundation of trusting relationships.
I have a question.
Yep.
You know how like if you have like a tough job or you know you experience something at work, like you tell your partner or like your spouse, is there any rules regarding that? Because I mean, granted,
Like you're thinking of your mom, probably.
Yeah, I was just
Yep.
trying to say my mom tells me everybody.
She probably doesn't tell you their name.
She doesn't say names. She's just
Right.
like, it's
Right.
just this kid is just
Right.
this person. And I'm like, well, granted, I'm never ever gonna meet any of these people she talks about. And there have actually been instances when I remember growing up, she was like doing like drug rehabilitation work.
That you'd see him on the
She'd
street.
see people
Right.
and she'd be like, and they would say stuff to her, she would never confront them. And then we'd be like, how do you know them? But I think at one point, we kind of gradually realized, oh, her job. Okay,
Right.
Kind of.
Right.
Like, oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
Cool. None of my business. But yeah, that kind of like, is that an issue of like being like telling your?
You aren't supposed to tell all their identifying factors.
Oh no,
so.
I don't know who is who.
Right.
But like.
But sometimes you vent about them as that's her transference and countertransference. She's stressed out about her job, so she's venting to you about it, probably.
Yeah. Well, not me specifically, but I've heard things about like, oh my gosh, like
Yeah.
crazy stuff. Or she'll tell my dad stuff. I'll just be around. I'm like, okay, this is not funny, but it was kind of funny because, so where she was working like 10 years ago, like I think it was like getting placement for women coming. I think it was a halfway house,
Mm-hmm.
and like making sure that the women are doing drugs and they're like behaving and like, participating in healthy habits.
Mm-hmm.
So I think at one point they were doing this search, and I guess there was mention of like crack
Mm-hmm.
or something, or someone had drugs, and so they had like a playground in the back of the house for their children when they would come visit. So my mom and her supervisor were like in their pantyhose, like in these skirts, on their knees, like looking for like
Looking for crack.
and they're like
Right.
outside and for a
Right.
good hour, and she turns to her boss and goes like, "Wait, what does crack look like?" And she's like, "I don't know either."
Right.
So that was funny to me.
A little
I'm like,
baking soda, a little cocaine. So
Yeah,
it's
I'm like,
enough of a rock that I knew folks that would just gum it. You get pulled over and you pop it in your gums. That's how you hide it. You go. You can even
Yeah.
have it in the bag still in your gums. Like, search me, bro. Like, go ahead.
Search me, bro, is crazy. Well, do you guys ever do like training with police officers to identify
The drugs.
certain substances? Yeah.
We would at like Claremont Recovery Center, looking at the footprints on the toilet seat, knowing that they hid it up in the rafters, because that's a common place to hide shit. Like that's the best place to hide stuff. You just pop it up, put your bag in there, and you're hidden.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, that means. Yeah, I remember when I was trying to volunteer for this Salvation Army in back in Wisconsin. They were like, "Well, how do you feel about telling people not to do drugs and kicking people out?" And obviously, I look how I look, and I know I'm small, kind of. And
I don't want to kick anybody out.
Yeah, I was like,
Yeah.
I'll just call the police. I'm like, well, sometimes you're slow. And like,
Right. Right.
And they're telling me like, you will know the smell of crystal meth. And I'm like, what?
Yeah, it's kind of chemically smell. That is interesting. That sounds scary. Yeah, I guess
Yeah.
they're giving you all the situations you could bump into.
And
And
then
you're
the
like,
pandemic happened, so I didn't get.
okay,
But,
okay.
like, it was just interesting because I'm like, well, how am I supposed to know these things? I mean, I get it from experience, but I'm like, police department gonna get involved because I was
Right.
training to just be an RA one time.
Right.
They came in, they were showing us like, oh, this is the different ways you can hide weed. I'm like,
Yeah.
cool.
The shoe was good too. Is you just pop it under the sock.
There's like sometimes people have like these like cans that aren't really cans, like the little stoners.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And you used to be
that's
able to get
cool.
on an airplane with like whitey tighty underwear and just put a bag in your underwear and get on. Now they scan you so thoroughly. You
They
can't
can see
get-
everything.
Yes.
Oh my
Yes.
I
It's
had my
terrible.
Inhaler. Oh, that's right. But
And they
I had
freaked
like
out.
3 of them, and I was going either to or from DC, and the woman behind the X-ray thing, she's like, "Ma'am, do you have asthma?" She kind of said it rough. I'm like, "Yeah." And then so I look at the screen, and the little pump kind of looks like a little.
Oh, it
was funny.
did.
I was like, "Oh, hi."
Right. That is, well, it's,
I was like, yes,
So,
I'm
yes.
severely asthmatic. And I
Yes.
go to the woods and stuff, so I brought 3 just in case I lose.
yeah. Yeah. The cool part is all the agencies you work for will train you, like your different. I got Appalachian training. Is we had 80% Appalachian clientele at Claremont Recovery Center because most of them in Claremont, Ohio, are Appalachian. Multicultural training, ethical training, like so. That's the cool part is you'll get most of that at your agencies. You'll get all these different ethics: the ethic of care, ethic of autonomy, ethics of power, ethic of change, ethic of respect. That's a good one. And then critical thinking. I want to make sure I praxis disclosure. That's something we have to do before I see anybody in my private practice. They have to have disclosure about like that they agree to see a counselor. It's totally voluntary. So as a social worker, you volunteer to come. Like, yes, you could be court ordered, but you also could choose to go to jail. So that's why it is still a choice. Like, no, I don't want to see a social worker. I'd rather go to jail. But like, it's a voluntary process that we come. Ethics of critique, justice, contextual practice, inclusion, anti-oppressive practice, and then advocacy. And the last 2 are collaboration and politicized practice. So there is some politics, but like really getting funding, finding ways to end poor housing situations or affordable housing and like redlining and things of that nature. So you'll see it.
This is slide 5.
This one? Is that what you
I'm
said?
sorry, not slide. PowerPoint 5.
Oh, it is PowerPoint 5. Yes. So it's like right lined up with chapter 5.
We can put like we can reference the PowerPoints in the book, right?
You could, yeah. There's a way to like perfectly cite. Do you guys? I guess you already know. You said you hate. Is it Bibliotext, Google Scholar? What are the other ones? You said you hate. Is it Bibliotext, Google Scholar? What are the